a purist, or not a purist, but an anal beer namer would actually say, so it's DHHDDH as far as the sequence of events went.
Correct.
Correct. Yes.
But DHH puts the cooler thing closer to the style. So
the more familiar thing first or something.
right.
Uh-huh.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Chop and Brew. I am Chip Walton. The last couple of episodes, we've done brew day episodes, homebrew brew day episodes, and I love that. But I also have a stockpile of pro brewer interviews that I really want to get out, because not only are they really fun conversations, usually with people I already know and I'm friendly with, so it's a very easy, casual conversation, but they're always full of ideas, tips, techniques for some kind of brewing process. And in this episode, we are not talking about trip hop. We are not talking about hip hop. We are talking about dip hop. And we're talking about dip hop with brewers Aaron Herman of Arbeiter Brewing Co and Nick Walby of State Brewing Cooperative. And the reason we're talking to Aaron and Nick is because they recently represented their respective breweries and did a collaboration, a dip hopped beer called Bibbidy Drippidy Hop Double Dry Hop Dip Hopped Hazy. Try saying that 10 times while drinking a triple IPA. The beauty is that these guys just came off a collaboration beer that involved dip hopping. And if you haven't heard of dip hopping, they're going to talk all about it. But in a nutshell, it's kind of like making a hop tea in your fermenter with a very small amount of your brew day boiled wort before you put almost 80 or 90% of it into the fermenter. This is a very interesting thing. Nick is part of an upcoming Brew Your Own magazine article about dip hopping, so he's just like on history, on technique, on results. He and Aaron are going to share some of the details of their recipe of their beer, talk about why they did it, talk about the end result that they feel they get from the beer, and then Nick, again, just kind of tells us a little bit of the who, what, when, where, why of dip hopping. It sounds like a very new technique that some American brewery would have come up with for all their hazies, but the truth is actually the opposite. Before we get started, I want to remind you that these pro tip episodes of Chop and Brew are brought to you with support from BSG Handcraft, bringing high quality malts and hops from around the world into your home brewery. Check them out at bsghandcraft.com, as well as our BFFs at Imperial Yeast, who are based out of Portland but are now also shipping commercial pitches out of their new facility in Philadelphia. More on that at imperialyeast.com. And as always, the Patreon party people, who are literally the jet fuel in the engine of the Chop and Brew Express. Join them, get on board, see what the rewards are all about at patreon.com/chopandbrew. Cheers, guys. Nick and Aaron. Cheers.
Cheers. Like 3 of the last 4 cans in existence right now.
So these are whales, brah. So I'm here with Nick Walby from Fair State, Aaron Herman from Arbeiter.
Boom.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
We're here specifically to discuss this beer, Bibbidy Drippidy Hop, and then I love this, DDHDDH, which, you know, over the last 2 or 3 years, all of us big hoppy beer nerds, DDH, you're used to pretty much seeing that. But then
totally.
the DHH, you're like,
right.
Wait, what's this then? And
hold on. Did they stutter?
Someone misprinted this can. So it's double dry hop, dip hopped hazy.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, it's a collaboration between Fair State and Arbeiter here in Minneapolis. So that you were the 2 guys in the brew house?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about the beer, the technique, recipe. But let's kind of just start off with the beer, since it's going to be gone so quickly. I worry if we don't talk about it, it might disappear.
Yeah.
Tell me about this beer specifically, and kind of how y'all came up with the idea.
Sure. So this beer specifically, It was, so Jared Johnson brought Nick and Rose from Fair State by like last fall just to kind of have a visit and a show around and kind of get to know you. And all of a sudden during, Jared all of a sudden just turned to me and said, let's talk collaborations. And we were like, I was like, okay. So, Nick, I think you and Aaron should brew a dip hopped hazy together. Nick put together a recipe for it, and we brewed it together at Arbeiter several months later. But so it's a pretty simple recipe. Nick is going to speak to this a bit later, but Pilsner malt, a little bit of malted white wheat, and a little bit of malted oats, and that's really it. The hops are definitely the star of the show. We use strata hops predominantly in this beer, as well as a cryo hop product. It was a blend of hop varieties in cryo format that were supposed to amplify the effects of biotransformation. So that was essentially the second dry hop charge. So moving through like the brew itself, I guess if we want to kind of move, we'll go through that right now. So yeah, touched on the grain bill, just a real simple mash. Yeah, nothing fancy. And then there was just a regular Whirlpool edition of strata hops, and then the kind of the big thing, the dip hop was also a strata edition. But what dip hopping is, halfway through the 90-minute boil, well, back up a little bit further, prep the fermenter as you normally would, sanitize it, drain all the sanitizer solution out of it, purge it out decently, and then to your empty room temperature fermenter, add hops to the fermenter. So then the hops are in your fermenter. You can kind of repurge it a bit if you would like. It's not, do your own process the way you see fit. But about halfway through your boil, take about 10% of your wort, run it through your heat exchanger, cool it to about 170, and put it directly in the fermenter. So you're making essentially a hop tea in your fermenter cone. With those hops. So they'll kind of steep. So it's kind of like whirlpooling. It's kind of like hop backing. But the difference here is that actual mass of hops is going to be in the fermenter essentially at, time 0 when your yeast begins to go through the fermentation process. So, proceed with the rest of the boil. Knock out appropriately, such that when your kettle, or when you're as you're knocking out, you're going to cool that kind of hot wort, hot hop tea wort in your fermenter cone down to make it safe to pitch yeast. And again, I'm not going to tell people how to when or how to pitch their yeast, but the way I prefer to do it is to pitch yeast during knockout. To give it as much kind of time and ability as possible to mix through the volume of wort as you're knocking it out. So obviously you don't want to pitch yeast into super hot wort because you'll kill the yeast. Adjust your knockout temperature appropriately such that the overall temperature of the wort in the fermenter is safe for the yeast. Pitch the yeast like normal, and then fermentation will begin, and you'll get, in theory, you'll get biotransformation from the very beginning of that fermentation arc. This beer started at 14.5 Plato. We were targeting about 3 degrees Plato as a terminal gravity, roughly. We were monitoring fermentation, of course, and at about 4 degrees Plato, so just almost done, is when we put the first dry hop addition in, and that was the cryo bio tea for sure. The cryo mixture of hop varieties. And then exactly 48 hours later was the second dry hop charge, making it the double dry hopped dip hopped hazy. And then obviously, the name is a tongue twister in and of itself, the
Bibbidy Drippidy Hop.
Drippity Hop. So as opposed to trying to call it, Bib Drib Hop or whatever. We just ended up calling it BDH in house. So it's BDH, DDH, DHH.
That's a lot of H.
It's a lot of everything.
Nick, so yeah, it sounds like you did research. You've written about this, bro, kind of on a pro, and I assume you kind of touched on the homebrew scale. Tell me a little bit, since you had done this before at least once and then brought it to Arbeiter, kind of what's your experience with the same process, and tell me a little bit about where this even came from. It sounds like a very American thing, but I believe you've said it isn't.
Yeah, it was created by the scientists that worked for Kirin Ichiban, I believe, Kirin Brewery in Japan. It was a scientist that had worked with hops for 30 plus years and just learned enough to realize that these things were happening when hops were introduced to fermentation. For quite a long time, I was really resistant because that goes against pretty much everything that I had been taught up to the time. Just on a practical level of hopping beer while it's fermenting at our level of volume, it is really dangerous, frankly. If you're not really paying attention to the gravity, you can find videos online of people that have dry hopped a beer too quickly or at too high of a gravity still, where fermentation is too near the high Krausen. Really? And what ends up happening is it nucleates the carbonation in the beer and it just ejects out of whatever the opening of the tank is.
Yep.
Can
I
very scary. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron. Yeah.
When it was time to do the first dry hop edition for BDH, DDH, DHH, I climbed up the ladder, opened up my 6-inch dry hopping port, and saw that there was still like Kreuzen up there, and I was like, whoa, I might want to reconsider things. So I actually I took a sample out of the Zwickel and put a small amount of hops in just like a pint glass to try and see if it would like nucleate on me or not. I actually I was able to kind of leave the brewery for a handful of hours and came back and decided to go for it. But I saw that Kreuzen and I was like, I'm a little concerned about dry hopping this beer right now because I didn't want to get blown off the ladder. So
I never heard of that. And that's not such a concern for homebrewers because of the volume, but you're basically sitting on top of like a jet engine tank.
Potentially. It is, so long as you're following your gravity readings and paying attention to it and have like flashlight available, it is relatively safe once you kind of get used to that procedure and things to look for and stuff like that. But I have seen it happen at places that I've worked. It has not happened to me, but if you go like pretty slow, pretty gingerly, it's not too big of an issue. On a homebrew level, I'm not sure, you might have like the equivalent of like a boil over or something like that.
Yeah. But if you're doing it in a bucket, you'd probably be a little safer.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, the top of the carboy pinches down into just like the bottle top. So if there is active fermentation going on, it could kind of maybe geyser out of there on you. But
right. So the beers that are being made here, dip hop, are kind of hazies. You were saying Kirin was probably not out to make a hazy beer. They were probably very specifically trying to figure out some way to up hops in a clear beer.
Yeah, correct. It's really good for shelf stability and specifically carrying forward that really hoppy aroma through a longer period of shelf life. Scientifically, from what I understand is occurring, I am by no means an expert on the actual science of this. I understand it to a point, but what it's actually doing is lowering the myrcene level that is actually present in the beers. And that contributes to really oniony flavors over time. And it greatly diminishes myrcene in the beers. We had done it with a beer at Fair State called Partying Past Burning Bridges. It was a collaboration with Three Floyds, and I was very impressed. I was a bit skeptical of what would happen and how it would work, and it ended up working pretty smoothly, very similar to what we did at Arbeiter. Got tank prepped, got some hops in there. At the commercial level, we have the technology of really nice heat exchangers, and so it makes that job really easy. We just knock out a portion, just enough to submerge the hops basically. And then you kind of want to like close the fermentation vessel to the outside. You want to like keep all those aromas in for a time. That's sort of part of it. And then another feature of this beer that we went with, there's no kettle additions of hops in this beer. The first actual hop addition of the beer is the dip hop portion that is actually happening in the fermenter. But otherwise it only gets like flame out whirlpool equivalent additions, and that's about it. Keeps the actual IBUs low while implementing a lot of that flavor, a lot of the really, really bright flavors. And when you go to knock out the rest, as Aaron mentioned, you want to knock it out at a lower than the temp that you're trying to hit for fermentation, like what the yeast is looking for, because you need to correct that from being at approximately 170 degrees back down to a pitchable temp. So you need to really severely kind of undercut that temp so that the whole homogeneous liquid ends up at your pitching temp.
Because your fermenter is already at this kind of tea temperature.
Precisely, yeah. Because there's a good probably half hour, 45 minutes between the finishing, or like when that hop tea is sort of made or introduced, and then finishing your boil, adding your whirlpool additions, do the actual whirlpooling, and then finishing that knockout.
Mm-hmm.
And
and they're getting warm too. Like not only the wort itself in there, but the fermenter is, the interior fermenter walls are heating up and stuff as well. So
right.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was really, really, really surprised at the aromas that were coming out when you go to knock that beer out. And you do like open, we have like blow off valves so that we're allowing the pressure to stay atmospherically neutral in the tank, or if a bit positive. So the beer is running in, it's not just catching all that pressure within the tank, it's actually blowing off through. And the aroma that comes out is like, the only way I can describe it is just like such a surgically clean hop aroma. It is brilliant and bright and incredible.
I'm glad you touched on that, because to me, when we were brewing this beer at Arbeiter, that aroma reminded me of being in the Yakima Valley.
Yep.
Like,
yeah, I remember you saying that.
There's been very, very few experiences I've had, like working with hops over the years, that where you get that aroma, and like some fresh hop brews I've been a part of, or just physically being in Yakima Valley is the only place you can smell that type of hop aroma.
Mm-hmm.
So
just in the air, it's so crazy when you get in Yakima downtown. You're just like, it smells like hot, heavenly hop air everywhere you go.
Literally just hop air. Yeah, it's great. Giant. But that was what the fermenter smelled like. So yeah, for any brewers or homebrewers out there that want to mimic the Yakima air experience, make a dip hop beer.
So tell me about the end result, and if you can you taste kind of the result of the dip hopping in this beer versus if it had just been more of this, our typical double dry hopped hazies that we're kind of doing? The
beer turned out to be like a lot brighter and cleaner hop tasting than I thought it was going to. Actually, I thought it was going to be like way like juicier and intense, and like, this kind of big drippy hop character, but it was just like a clean and bright, like when this beer was like nice and fresh, it almost to me tasted like squirt soda, like grapefruit soda, because I had carbonate, it was nice and effervescent from the carbonation, and just a glorious, clean, grapefruity, mango-y type flavor to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's just held that note a lot longer than most hazy beers that I come across in market.
Yeah, that's true too.
So yeah, I think that science seems to be pretty well founded.
Mm-hmm.
So considering that, I would assume Kieran is like a lager, right? An international kind of lager house. You guys are doing a double dry hopped hazy. What other styles could you see a dip hop benefiting? Maybe for one reason or another, the crispness, the aroma. Where else would you see maybe taking this that would be like, they're the first person that tried it over here?
I would love to see it in like a really hoppy Pils lager, like the Fair State Pils. I've been internally trying to push for that a little bit. But it proves really difficult when you start talking about lager because of the time that lager beer sits on its yeast. And so it becomes really difficult to manage like the autolysis part of it. And we have horizontal lagering tanks. And so keeping hops that long on lager would be really difficult. It might get really like even more vegetal than we would like. But the aroma portion of it, I think would be absolutely brilliant. Like clean meets clean.
Yeah, like an IPL that's dip hopped.
Yeah.
What about you, Aaron?
I'm toying around with IPLs here already. So thanks for the idea.
Yeah.
Earlier today, I was thinking of just doing, I'm not sure if I want to give away all my secrets. No, I'm kidding. Just make a little sessionable pale ale, where the only, and this isn't, I know I'm not the first one to have this idea, but the only hop edition would be the dip hop edition, and just make a little, 4.6%, just very pale, ale, unfiltered, not necessarily a hazy beer, but, even just like a smash beer for all intents and purposes. Just use simple 2-row and select a hop variety and just dip hop it, and that's it.
Do you think because the dip hopping occurs at 170, which is a bit below the actual like hop isomerization, or the most efficient isomerization, do you think it would carry enough bitterness through on something like that?
I don't know, but that would be like the experience.
Actually, I don't know either. It just kind of crossed my mind.
Who cares?
Right? That's the beauty, right?
I do think it would taste good, especially if you design like kind of a delicate enough beer around it, where you don't need bitterness to balance, or as much bitterness to balance out.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
I'm having a hard time thinking of kind of like the workflow of where it gets added. Like I'm trying to think, would it be beneficial to a kettle sour or something that specifically wants low IBU, but you might want a certain kind of flavor of a hop in it? But that's where I'm like, well, I can't.
Cool idea.
When it's in the hop tea, have that been introduced to the souring or not? I guess it depends how you kettle sour beer, right?
Yeah. If you're truly kettle souring, then you could do it. But if you're doing like a kind of like a combination fermenter kettle sour deal, then it'd be a lot trickier to pull it.
You'd already be a step beyond.
Right.
Really. But,
yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
I kind of wonder what would happen to that tea as well over that amount of time. Like typically a kettle sour locks up the brew house for like 24 to 48 hours ish, approximately, depending on process. And I wonder what would happen to that tea over that amount of time in the fermenter.
I see. You're saying it would just be sitting there anyway, not actually being blended.
Right.
Well, I would do it I would do it at the end of the kettle souring.
The next day.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah, once you get your wort, hot, when you're at the point where you're killing off the lacto in the kettle.
Yeah, you got to reboil it, right?
Then
that makes a lot more sense.
That's too much math, man.
Yeah, like, welcome to our world.
The IBUs of 10% of this beer are this, but then when it hits this, but my brain wanted to go somewhere that would make it very difficult.
Yeah,
as if it's not already difficult enough for someone at home to do it. So you got an article, Nick, coming out in BYO that's going to kind of talk about all things dip. How did they come to know about your guys' recipe? Somebody in the cities here?
I'm not even sure. I'm not sure. I think it probably just got some publication, just this collaboration. And then we did another one with Drecker that was similar, another one with Three Floyds that was pretty similar technique.
Okay.
And, but yeah, I am not sure how BYO got a hold of it other than just like dip hopping is kind of like the trend of late. So
not trip hop, dip hop.
That's right. That's right.
So cool. That article will be coming out in a future BYO. Nick, Aaron, I really appreciate the beer. Aaron, you said this was a hit. So do you think we'll see it again or some variation?
I could definitely see rebrewing this for sure. And yeah, as I kind of alluded to, my wheels are turning for more dip hopping opportunities. So stay tuned to Arbeiter for more of that. But yeah, I would love to rebrew this. It was a hit.
That's cool. Well, if you wanted a recipe, you're gonna have to wait for BYO.
That's
We
right.
ain't gonna scoop our friends at BYO. We just want to kind of dip our toe, so to speak, in the water of dip hop beers. Yeah, it's awesome. I really liked it. It's very, like you said, it is kind of like this squirt grapefruit soda, not muddy. You know, a lot of the double dry hopped hazies they're good, and I still love them, but they can sit heavy. This one really kind of like had almost like a not a saison-y in a spicy way, but a saison kind of vibe off the top, carrying those hazy hops, those bigger kind of tropical hops down. It was awesome. It's cool.
It turned out to be 6.7% ABV, which was a tad higher than we were shooting for. It definitely doesn't drink like that. It's a very palatable, like refreshing 6.7, and there aren't those big kind of dripping, cloying hop notes. It's real nice to drink.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna say chop for chop, dip for dip.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Chip.
Yeah, man. No, this was fun. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Man, I'm glad that didn't come. It took all my wit to let you get through that sentence before I was like,
yeah. Did you drink too many D's and H's just now?
So yeah, I'm actually pretty excited to see it. I made a request that Aaron and I get a copy, hopefully, when that comes out. Because I mean, I used to watch Chop and Brew when I was starting like years and years ago, and then it's wild that I'm on here. But yeah, I used to read BYO all the time, and it's really cool that I'm gonna have a recipe in there.
And as always, the Patreon party people who are the jet fuel of this crazy soul plane. What the am I thinking? Oh, I think that's good. I don't know. I know this is good. I'm gonna drink up all this.